You know that feeling where you're both excited and terrified of starting a new project for fear of messing it up? Yeah, that was this. Hi, I'm Irene, and this is the Inkworks studio, where today pride and joy triumphs over doubt and dismay. That's right, this painting is a success story, especially considering the little mistakes I was able to fix along the way. That's thanks to the magic of gouache, the water-based opaque wonder medium. I'll share my thoughts on the particular brand of gouache used for this painting, but a little later. The paper is a sheet of Artist Loft cold press cellulose. You can find it in Michael's craft stores at a budget-friendly price. Everything that happened on that sheet, from sketching to the finishing details, took nearly 3 hours. So much of the video is double speed. While planning this voiceover, the footage had been edited down to about 27 minutes. That's still on the long side. So I'll be talking about a lot of things, and one of those things is how a design can change. During both the drawing and painting processes, I mean. For example, you might notice the face being drawn there looks quite different from the one in the concept sketch to the left, but it eventually evolved into something closer to the original idea. The point is, don't worry, it all turned out fine in the end. When Anne from Art on the Creek issued the Disney Villains Art Challenge for this month, I was like, heck yeah! After getting into the board game Villainous and it now being the spooky season, I was totally on board. Sure, I'm not able to participate in all of the prompts, but the important thing is to get inspired, have fun, and see and share some art. By the way, information about Anne's Disney Villains Art Challenge is linked in the description. Why choose the evil queen? It's the classic, beautiful but heartless character, and in my opinion, it's the best thing about Disney's animated Snow White movie. Obviously, it's a clear and simple good versus evil scenario, and sometimes simple is best, especially if your movie is barely 80 minutes long. However, that's one of the reasons the 1937 version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has never been on my favorite Disney movies list. I don't know, I kind of want more from a movie. And maybe that's why my favorite version is the deep and dark Snow White, A Tale of Terror from 1997. At 100 minutes long, there's room for gray areas. Plus, Sigourney Weaver, she was so good at being bad. Inking the drawing accomplished a couple of things. One, it made sure I wouldn't lose the design during the painting stage. And two, it would put my gouache's opacity levels to the test. Because between here and the end product, I did alter the shape of the face. That's a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen, by the way, with a soft brush tip. So graphite for the sketch and ink for the loose line work. Everything after that was gouache, and only gouache. Why this medium rather than, say, watercolor? Because I was aiming for something a bit bold and a bit cartoony. And in my mind, at least, watercolors are delicate and can be difficult to control. Often, they want to do their own thing. They're the cat of the paint world, and I needed a dog for this piece. You're going to see me waving around a big brush for just a moment, and I'll talk about that big brush later on. Right now, I want to update you on how this gouache palette experiment is going for me. I'm using the Magello Fusion 33 palette. It's made of high impact plastic. While it is portable, the dimensions make it somewhat cumbersome for that purpose. This is my second Fusion 33, and I only use them in the studio. The top row has Holbein's basic color set. The middle row is Holbein's Autumn Iridori set. And the bottom row, other than the single gold dollop on the far left, consists of Da Vinci brand gouache. That includes their CMYK set, as well as several individual colors. As you may have noticed, there was some crumblage. That was expected. To minimize that, I need to remember to not tilt the thing on its side. Look, I've painted a number of gouache pieces this past year, and I agree with people who've said that fresh from the tube is best. But after completing this project, I've discovered that this setup is helpful for how I work. Maybe it has to do with this project's scale, but I had no problem painting from this palette. A few drops of water was enough to soften the dried paints, and when I needed a lot of a specific color, the handy swatch chart told me exactly which one to squeeze, either into its generously sized well or onto the large mixing tray. So these were all first layers here. As things progressed, there were second and, in some areas, third layers as well. In fact, I spent quite a lot of time on facial details, making mistakes and covering them up. So some spots might have ended up being 4 layers deep. Interestingly, unlike a recent M. Graham gouache project, at no point did I want to throw in the towel with this painting. Although I was hesitant to start, once the ball got rolling, it was one step after another until it was completed. So, although there were missteps along the way, it wasn't a frustrating experience. On the contrary, it was mostly enjoyable and ultimately satisfying. I know it all looks a bit pale and pastel-y there, but trust me, things will improve, except for the lack of ears. That issue was never resolved. But don't blame me. Take it up with Disney. On the topic of satisfying things, I recently tried a pumpkin cake recipe found online. That's right, I took a random recipe from Pinterest and trusted it enough to invest not only flour, sugar, and eggs, but my precious time as well. I expect a lot of us have learned the hard way how random recipes can go. Sure, they can send you to rare heights, but they can also send you to the depths of despair. Please tell me I'm not the only sap who's been disappointed by the so-called better-than-sex cake. But honestly, the pumpkin cake recipe turned out okay. It was yummy enough, I guess, but it lacked the flavorful fall spiciness I was craving. FYI, 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice for a 9x13 cake isn't going to cut it. Fortunately, my baking experiment motivated producer Mike to pull out the box of Libby pumpkin bread mix from the back of the pantry. That's where the satisfying part comes in. Because after that box was dusted off, opened up, the contents mixed together, and baked in the Ninja Foodie Smart XL air oven, the result was absolutely delicious. Although it was already moist and well-spiced, we did dress it up with either butter or non-dairy whipped topping, and a drizzling of caramel sauce. It really brought the autumn, I tell you. Best of all, that one box made 2 loaves. Actually, I just found an article on Insider.com that reviewed 4 store-bought pumpkin bread mixes, and Libby's took the top spot. To reiterate, I highly recommend Libby's boxed pumpkin bread mix, and Insider.com backs me up on that. So, the gouache used for this piece was the Da Vinci brand from California. I have about 10 colors from them. They were a recent acquisition, so I wanted to test them out on an actual painting project. Spoiler, they worked fine. I didn't have any big problems. As far as gouache in tubes, I enjoy using both Da Vinci and Holbein. If I had to choose between them, I'd go with Holbein, as long as it was on sale, which does happen from time to time with their sets. And that's mainly because I really like the consistency of Holbein's gouache. Now, I also have M. Graham's set of 5 basic gouache colors in tubes, and I have used them on a painting, but have not finished it, because I got frustrated. That might have had something to do with my techniques, but I'm pretty sure it was mainly due to the lower opacity with M. Graham's gouache. So that project is on the back burner. A more patient artist could probably work it into a decent piece, but at this point, I'm not sure I want to finish it. Recently, I've been spending time with family, catching up and getting some things done. Longtime viewers might think I have stories, but being the youngest child means I miss some stuff. Has that happened to you? You think you know, but an older sibling sets you straight later in life. Wait, what? When did that go down? Oh, you were just a baby at the time. For example, growing up, I always thought it was strange how one of our neighbors, I'll call her Mrs. H, she had 2 homes in our neighborhood. Seriously, she split her time between the baby blue house kitty corner to us and the yellow house behind us across the alley. I was just a kid at the time, and eventually I simply chalked it up to, Europeans. I remember Mrs. H would stop by and chit-chat with my mom, telling her all about her woes. Or at least that's what I assumed. Her accent was pretty strong, so I could only make out half of what was said. But what I did understand was pure drama. Pretty sure Mom didn't really want to hear about it, but she was polite and lent a sympathetic ear. Until Mrs. H started letting herself inside in the afternoon. That's right, in the front door, through the house, out the back door, and across the alley to the yellow house. I can be oblivious about a lot of things, but that's its own story. The point is, my older sister just recently explained to me that while Mom was willing to listen to her neighbor's troubles, she wasn't willing to be used as a shortcut for an extramarital affair. And that was the reason Mom started keeping the doors locked during the day. It only took 50 years to clear up that mystery. Well, 2 mysteries, really. Because as kids back then, we were used to running in and out of the house freely. So suddenly having to knock to be allowed back inside while it was still daylight, that was a head-scratcher. Anyway, if there's a takeaway from this, it's that your older siblings know a thing or two. Looking at how the facial details were applied in stages reminds me of the Barbie head toy. The one that was almost life-size and you could put makeup on it. I never had one, but at some point in childhood I was envious of those who did. I'm not saying I never had new toys, but more often than not, they were secondhand from a random grab bag where the so called fashion dolls had literally nothing to wear. I like to think that my Danish heritage adds weight to my opinions about European fairy tales, a sort of ancestral channeling of Hans Christian Andersen energy. But I'm pretty sure that's not how things work. Not in my experience, anyway. Because to this day, I still get them confused. Andersen, Charles Perrault, and the Grimm brothers. Their stories, I mean. I get their stories confused. It's easier to remember that Andersen was Danish, Perrault was French, and the Grimms were German. But don't ask me who wrote Little Red Riding Hood. That reminds me, there's a movie from 2005 titled The Brothers Grimm. It starred Matt Damon and Heath Ledger and was directed by Terry Gilliam. The story incorporated elements from a number of fairy tales. A spell, a queen, a tower, a magic mirror, a wolf, a curse, and imperiled children. It's a pretty interesting movie. I enjoyed it, but I understand Terry Gilliam isn't for everyone. There's a lot of mud and peasants and muddy peasants and some twisted humor. When it comes to fairy tale mashups, I'm more of a Into the Woods fan. I watched a recording of a live performance with most of the original Broadway cast. It aired as part of the PBS program, American Playhouse, back in 1991. I also enjoyed the film version from 2014. Something more obscure, though, is a Rankin Bass movie from 1966 called The Daydreamer. It was a combination of live action and stop motion animation. It imagined Hans Christian Andersen as a young man, getting the seeds of future stories from his dreams. Thumbelina, the Emperor's New Clothes, The Ugly Duckling, and The Little Mermaid are some of the stories referenced in that movie. There is another film that assembles several fairy tales for its story, and that's The Tale of Tales from 2015. It's an Italian, French, and UK production based on a collection of fairy tales called Il Pentamerone. They were assembled by Giambattista Basile back in the early 1600s. Although some of them appear to be earlier versions of tales that Perrault and the Grimms later popularized, none of the stories in the Tale of Tales movie were familiar to me. I spent way too long looking up the proper grammar for that sentence, and I'm still unsure. None were or none was. The point is, it's a beautiful film that's fascinating to watch. The sets and costumes are stunning, while the tone and atmosphere are unsettling. No, it's not for little ones. There are moments that are disturbing and moments that are grisly. Definitely a grown-up movie, in my opinion. But if you are into fairy tales and don't mind the dark stuff, I highly recommend The Tale of Tales. Decades ago, I actually had a Snow White costume. I'd needed a Disney outfit for work at the time, and that one fit both my body and my budget, so I snapped it up. It came in handy for several Halloweens, but was retired from service some years back. On the subject of costumes, Karolina Zabrowska just recently dropped a video of herself in an 1830s dress, covered from neck to toe in heavy fabrics. She always makes me laugh, but this was especially good because she was working out on exercise equipment. to get in shape for the winter ball season. Except she recommended skipping leg day. As she said, nobody's gonna see them anyway. I had put one of my newest brushes to work on this piece, a 1-inch silver white stroke from Silver Brush Limited. It has synthetic sable filaments, and I have no complaints. It was only for the first background layer, but in my mind, that's an important step. If the background ended up looking sorta bleh, well, that was due to my subsequent choices. Because at one point I used a smaller flat brush to darken the background, which made it into a mess. If I could do it over, I'd get one of those spouncer type brushes. The ones for stenciling. I'd use that to soften the strokes and make it look more mottled. The reason it was left as is because after nearly 3 hours on this painting, I was done. Well, mostly. The foreground wasn't popping, so still using gouache, I added multiple thick outlines to get it there. Other than the silver white stroke, all of the brushes used here are from Princeton. For gouache, I prefer to use brushes that are somewhat firm or springy, so the Snap and Select lines are my current go-tos. A small flat brush from the Umbria line has joined my collection. It's pretty, and I'm eager to try it out. But silly me, I forgot to use it on this project. When I say it's pretty, I mean I really like looking at it. The handle is a lovely olivey brown with a satiny finish and gold labeling. Plus, the synthetic hairs are dye-tipped. Yeah, I'm kicking myself for not including it. Some might be surprised to hear there was a short-lived 80s sitcom called The Charmings. It had a silly premise. Snow White, Prince Charming, their 2 children, the evil queen, the magic mirror, and a dwarf are placed under a spell and awaken in modern-day California. From what I remember, it was amusing, but the best part of the show was actress Judy Parfitt as the evil queen. I've liked Judy in every role I've seen her in, most especially in the excellent movie adaptation of Dolores Claiborne. I would have preferred the series to focus on Judy's character while limiting the others to occasional appearances. But sadly, I wasn't in charge, and strongly worded letters only get you so far. Speaking of, if you've got something to say, post a comment, strongly worded or otherwise. I think I already mentioned the paper is Artist Loft. That's Michael's Craft Store's own brand. Although I've seen Artist Loft products listed on Amazon and Walmart as well, which is confusing. In any case, it's very affordable. A 9x12 pad of 24 sheets is, I believe, $10. It's part of the level 2 category of art products. It's 140-pound weight, cold pressed cellulose. For watercolor paintings, I would go with 100% cotton paper, but for gouache, I think cellulose paper works fine. One of the last touches on this piece happened after tape removal. That footage was sacrificed for time. It was just a couple of barely there stress creases between the eyebrows, because all of the bejeweled heart boxes and all of the magic mirrors can't change the fact that you won't stay beautiful forever. Oh hey, if you aren't feeling too villainous, please hit like and subscribe to this channel. I mean, at 20 minutes in, there's gotta be a good reason you're still here. I'm happy to share this painting session because, one, it was a satisfying experience. Two, it was my first real project using Da Vinci brand gouache, which did not disappoint, by the way. And three, I got to participate in an art challenge. Usually, I'm too slow to catch those things, so I'm feeling pretty good about this. Until next time, no poisoning. I mean it. And stay artsy, my friends.